This book was one that it scared the pants off of me, but I'm so glad to talk to its author, Riley Sager, to really learn about what it's like to craft books that Stephen King called best books of the year behind it. And this conversation with Riley was really an amazing one. A couple things that I think were really helpful for anyone who's creating a creative story, whether it's a novel or a memoir. A couple big takeaways were, number one, he tells you to start finding the twist at the beginning. Begin with the twist and then work backwards. And it's a really interesting idea here of understanding that. And I talk a lot with authors about this idea of identifying first the moments that matter. For Riley, that means the twists, but whatever it may be for you is start with those pieces. The second thing that he talks about for any author is to remember that you should have a long-term goal. And when you're thinking about your career as an author in this book, remember, it's the long game. You're writing this book for other reasons and other purposes, whether it's to do building your business, whether it's to help you do more books, but figure out the long game, and that will keep you pushing through those times that are really hard in it. And the last thing that I think is great for Riley, that Riley shares with all of us, especially for anyone writing a creative pursuit, is that sometimes we can be worried about what the elite, what the people who are in the book world say. You know, who cares about that sort of stuff? Focus on what you enjoy. If it's tropes, if it's conventions, if it's things that matter, write what you're excited about. You can always make it your own in those ways, but don't listen to other people. It is your book. I love this conversation with Riley. There was so much in it, so many fun things. You'll also see that he's one credit away from graduating at Penn State. For any of my Penn Staters, help this guy get his degree. And then lastly, if you enjoy listening to modern authors like Riley Sager, definitely please subscribe. That way you can get these delivered to you every week. Remember, the key thing is we want to help you learn, help you understand, and build a community so that you feel like you're never writing alone.
My major in college was film studies.
Really?
Yes. So it wasn't even making movies. It was just watching movies and writing papers about them, which was great to spend, 4 years doing. My major in college was film studies.
Really?
Yes. So it wasn't even making movies. It was just watching movies and writing papers about them, which was great to spend, 4 years doing, but it doesn't prepare you for anything in the real world. So I fell into journalism. That my college had a really big student-run newspaper, one of the biggest in the country, and I thought their film critics sucked. So I applied and became their film critic, and then worked my way up to being one of the higher up editors.
Stephen King writes in On Writing how difficult it was to write in the perspective of a female character. He talks about Carrie. How do you get yourself in the mindset of a character that you can't directly relate to in that way?
How I approach all my characters is not through gender, but through what happened to them,
right,
and how they might react to a certain situation. I always try to make them not stereotypes. I always try to make them flawed but strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I always try to avoid that thing where you're reading a book and you're like, oh God, this character is so stupid. Why is she doing that?
Right.
I don't come from it as oh, this is a woman. I come from it this is a human being with flaws and needs and wants and, a past.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think about character development and the research and the backstory creation behind it? What is that process like?
I'm a very, very big outliner. I outline a ton. It's this woman who moves into this takes a job as an apartment sitter in this mysterious, possibly sinister apartment building. And when one of the other apartment sitters there suddenly vanishes, she decides to try to find out what happened to her. Why would she stay? In the outlining process, she stays, one, because she needs money. She's desperate. She lost her job. She lost her boyfriend. She doesn't have an apartment anymore. Mm-hmm. So she needs to stay in this building in order to make some money. The building has rules for its apartment sitters. That was another way of keeping her inside. Why does she really want to find out what happened to this other apartment sitter who went missing? Her sister, when she was a teenager, also went missing, and they don't know what happened. She has this soft spot for missing girls and wants to find out what happened. The more you think about it, the more these things can, fall into place.
And how much time does that take? Like that process, how much time do you spend in the building this out before you start really putting heavy pen to paper for at least that first?
It really depends on the book. Like the one that I just finished and my editor now has, I really didn't outline that at all. That was more like, okay, I'm just going to write and see what happens and, adjust as I go along. The plot was so complex. It was, it's a book within a book, and
Right.
the chapters alternate and one reflects the other and they're 25 years apart and things like that. I didn't really write any of it until that whole outline was done. Once I was writing, the outline really didn't change. It made the writing process very easy because I had spent so much time thinking about it and structuring it and plotting it out. As another example, I knew I wanted to do an apartment sitter in a creepy apartment building.
Mm-hmm.
So then it became, okay, what's going down in this apartment building?
Mm-hmm.
That has to be, so I addressed that even before I started outlining, okay, I need to figure out what's going on here. I start with, here's the idea, here's the log line, here's the characters, what's the end game? And then you can sort of structure how you see best to lead up to the end game. So a lot of my twists are built in before I really start outlining.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote 3 books under my real name, and they didn't sell at all. I had a publishing deal, and then they just dropped me. So I came up with the idea for what would become Final Girls. And I wrote it very, very quickly. I wrote the first draft in 9 weeks because I was desperate and I had nothing else to do. So my agent read it and said, this has breakout potential. This could be pretty big. You should use a pen name.
Really?
So my agent laid it out for me. She's like, okay, so, you've had these books under your real name. They didn't sell. If we send Final Girls to editors with your real name on it, first thing they'll do is go to your sales record. And based on that, they will give you a shitty deal with a shitty cover and shitty publicity. My agent said, think of an old family name. And so I just gave her my maternal grandmother's maiden name is Sager, R.L., Riley Sager. That's got a certain ring to it. I think that will be my new name. I think the conventions of thriller and horror, they're kind of shorthand. We all know what they are. And so I think it really helps to quickly establish a mood and stakes if we kind of lean in to these tropes or stereotypes that we've seen before, and then sort of try to put a different, fresh spin on them. And so that was my goal with that book, is I definitely wanted to get some Amityville horror in there and some Hill House and some other, classic haunted house themes, and then just twist it just a little bit so it doesn't feel like a complete retread of something you've read before. I do update the outline a lot, but then as you're writing it and revising, you tend to just memorize the whole book.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you sort of encourage younger authors to understand about, the world of publishing books?
Authors, what do you want to get out of this? A friend of mine who works at the LA Times had his debut book come out this year. And I said, what is your goal? Do you want to be a full-time author, or do you want to keep reporting and this is just, sort of like a hobby for you? And he's like, I like my job. I like being a reporter. This is just sort of a side gig. I'm like, then you're good. Keep doing what you're doing. So it really is on what you personally want to get out of it. And if it is I have a story to tell and I want other people to read it, I want to write a book and have my name on that cover, and that'll be good. Once that happens, I was like, maybe I'd like to be more successful than this or sell more copies than this. Authors do have to think about what's trending in the industry. Yeah. And so if you do want to become, a best-selling full-time author, you will need to be more mainstream about things. What's important to you and your story? Is it to tell the story, or is it to sell books? Stephen King read Final Girl 6 months before it came out and tweet to his like million plus followers that it was good. He called it the first great thriller of 2017. That tweet changed my life completely. A couple weeks later, it was in Entertainment Weekly. How far can I push them, out of their comfort zone without alienating them with every book? There are discussions with my editor and my agent, like, okay, do you think we can do this? And my readers will go along with it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I'm famous, but like there have been moments where like I've introduced myself to other authors and they'll be like, yeah, I know who you are. It's like, and it just always catches me off guard. Always. Yeah.
You got thriller author, like, everyone. It's funny. When I was reading all of the praise here, man, the praise writers, right? Really, like, there's the funny words they use.
It's the blurb, the industrial blurb complex is insane. Like, I don't think blurbs sell books at all. Mm-hmm. Yet everyone needs them.
Yeah.
And so it's this weird process of like, you're chasing down blurbs while other people are chasing you for blurbs. There's a book coming out in May that I got to read in advance, The Hunting Wives. And I wrote a blurb. I said, this is the kind of book your mother warns you. They didn't use that one on the cover.
If there's a genre that you would do that would be wildly different than that one, is there a book that you would take a risk on?
I'm not that ambitious. I do sort of straddle that line between horror and thriller.
Right. Now that you are, a famously sort of well-established author, how do you battle perfectionism, right?
And the king of imposter syndrome. Like, that's why reading bad reviews doesn't really affect me all that much, because I've said much worse stuff about myself than what someone on Goodreads could say about me. Part of my process and makes my books better, because I am so hard on myself that I don't settle for maybe the first idea, where I am like, no, you suck. I'm always convinced that my next book is my worst book until those first sort of reviews start trickling in. And then you normally can breathe a sigh of relief, because I can't tell you, for example, Home Before Dark. I just was like, this is the one. They're going to find out that I don't know what I'm doing, and it's all over now. So it was a good run. And so it was genuinely a surprise when people were like, I like this book.